Today on Addicted to Gear, we're going to be doing a couple of mods to this Kramer Baretta Special. We're going to be modding this guitar once again. Yes, this is my Kramer Baretta Special, a very inexpensive guitar that plays really well. I mentioned in my videos in the past how great these guitars are because they're so inexpensive and they really do make an awesome modding platform. You don't have to worry too much because they're not that expensive. I did a full review on this guitar, so if you want to see that video, I'll put the link up above so you can watch it in its full glory as it was originally. But since then, there have been a few mods that I've done to this guitar. So if you have a keen eye, you probably can already spot the mods that I'm going to be talking about in today's video. Yes, I actually went with a full stealth color scheme on the guitar now. I didn't really like the look of the chrome on the black body and the black headstock. I figured it would look way more rock and roll if I would just change those to black and basically install a black Vegatrem and change the tuners to Wilkinson's in black. So that's what we're going to be doing in today's video. So I'm going to show you how to swap out the Vegatrem and how to swap the tuners on the guitar. So without further ado, let's jump to my messy workbench and get the video started so I can show you how I did the mods. If you can get one of these guitars on the used market, grab them. They're great. You can definitely mod the heck out of them, and they play extremely well right out of the box. Just maybe requires a little bit of a setup. This one has already been modified to a certain degree. So if we mosey on over to the pickup, you'll see that this is a Seymour Duncan pickup. The original pickup is not a Seymour Duncan. This is a JB, so it's been replaced, as well as the stock bridge. This is a Vegatrem that I installed on this guitar a while back, and it's a huge upgrade. This bridge in a guitar like this makes it so much more fun to play and really elevates this guitar to another level. I also upgraded or modded the volume knob here. This guitar has only one volume knob, and this is an MXR style knob. It actually, you know, the lines actually glow in the dark, so I thought that was pretty cool. A little homage to Eddie himself. So what we're going to do with the guitar today is we're going to do two things. We're going to change the Vegatrem on this guitar to a black version, because I always felt that the chromed version didn't really suit the style of the guitar, being that the guitar is completely black. We're going to put in this black version, which I think is going to be cool, and we're also going to change the tuners here, which are chrome, and we're basically going to install these. These are Wilkinson style tuners, and I'm hoping that they're going to be a direct drop-in, so I won't have to enlarge the holes or make extra holes in the back of the headstock. We'll see once we remove the stock tuners, but basically we're turning this Kramer Baretta Special into a stealth model. It's going to be completely black. The nut's already black, so that's a good thing. And this guitar plays extremely well. The setup on this, the action is really low, and it just plays so well that I just felt it would be worthwhile to do these mods to it and really end up with a really cool looking and playing guitar. So without further ado, let's get started on the headstock first. We're going to install these tuners and see how that goes, and then we're going to go all the way down to the bridge and try and upgrade that bridge to the stealth model, the black model, and see how that turns out. So we're going to start by removing the strings, and pretty boring stuff, but needs to be done. I want to thank you guys for supporting the channel and all your kind comments and words, especially those of you who like these messy workbench editions of Addicted to Gear. I'm glad you guys are getting something out of it, and hopefully I'll do more. I'll try and do a little bit more for you guys. Now these these guitar modifications don't always go according to plan, right? So, you know, if there's surprises along the way, well, we kind of go through that together, which is cool and it's fun. And that's the beauty of doing these kind of things to your guitars. You learn along the way, either the easy way or the hard way. And even though, you know, doing something like replacing the tuners seems like a pretty straightforward thing, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you come across some interesting gotchas. And this is why it's fun to do this together. So if you guys own one of these guitars and you haven't already considered doing any kinds of modifications to it, by all means you should. Because it's really cool. There's a lot of stuff you can do with these guitars. When you're removing the strings, the Vegatrem is floating, right? So you kind of have to expect the bridge to kind of tilt away into the body of the guitar, which it's doing right now, and I'll show you that in a second. Not a big deal. There's ways you can actually, what I should have done is actually supported that a little bit better first, but I'll show you what I mean. So here you see the bridge now is no longer floating, right? Because the strings were taken off. And the strings is what holds the bridge in place. So now the springs on the bottom of it are kind of pulling it down, which is okay, but you know, this is something we're going to deal with afterwards. We're going to look at the remaining tuner setup first, but just in case anybody has a Vegatrem and is doing this, you know, this is what happens, right? This is the whole floating thing. That's how it actually works. So I'll explain that to you a little bit later. Alright, now that we have the strings off of it, I always like to inspect the neck to make sure that everything is okay with the frets. You can see there's some oxidization on these frets. They could use a little polish. Maybe I'll do that later. And the fretboard also can use a little hydration. So I'll probably do that as well now that I have the strings off. It's always a good idea to check that. The nut is not loose, so that's good. And you know, we'll just basically concentrate on the tuners. So let's flip the guitar over. So I think I'll resort to my trusty tool that I show all the time here. This is a great tool. If you don't have one, get one. You have all of the bits that you need, and you don't lose them. So you want to make sure you have the very fine bit here, because these screws are very, very tiny. And you have to also remember, guys, when you're doing this, you want to make sure you don't strip any of these screws, because they're so small and usually not made of the best metal that they strip quite easily. So you can see that, you know, look at that screw head. It's very, very small. Alright, so now that we have that off, the first thing I want to do is I want to see whether or not the new tuners fit in here. So before I take everything off, let me just turn the guitar, flip the guitar over one more time. So I'm going to need to take this off. I use a set of these. These are a 7-piece nut driver set, which have all of the sizes that I would need to remove these and not have to damage anything. Usually the 10mm will work. What I like about these is that the shaft is deep, so it actually can accommodate the shaft of the tuner. When you flip things over, sometimes you get confused. This is the one that should be coming off here. Alright, now that we have the right one off, the only real way to know is to slip one in and see. So let's put it in. Fits in the hole nicely. Let me just put in the flange and just hold it in place. Make sure everything is going in nicely. And at this point we don't want to put it in extremely tight. Just finger tight will do. And we're going to check the location of the screw hole. That's the most important thing. So we'll flip it over one more time, and with a little bit of luck it'll line up. And that's pretty good. I think we're pretty lucky there. It actually lines up almost perfectly. So let me just take one of the screws that comes with the black tuners, put it in there, and see if we can put it in straight without even having to drill new holes. That would be even better. If you can get everything to match up, it's fantastic. And that's kind of the reason why I bought these, because it's a direct replacement. Okay, yeah, so that's good. So once I tighten it up, see it's a little bit loose, still has some play, but once I tighten them up, they'll be a beautiful match. So that's great. That's exactly what I was looking for, guys. This is going to be a piece of cake. Thankfully, my sharp eyes mean that I don't have to fandangle anything. Alright, so now that I have all the screws taken off here, we're going to flip it over one more time, loosen up all of the tuners. Save all these parts, guys, because you can always use them for another build. And I always save everything because sometimes you're looking for a washer, you know, a tuner might break, whatever. You always are looking for parts, so why not save everything and put them in the bin, you know, the tickle trunk. Alright, so at this point I'm just going to pass through all the others. You can see there's still some dust that wasn't there originally. Always good to remove that. Like, you don't want to have schmutz on your tuner like this. See that? That's not actually very good for tuners. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna clean this out a little bit very quickly here. I like to put in a drop or two of oil inside of just inside of this thing here. This is basically where the threads go for the washer that goes on here, just to make things a little bit easier and smoother to go in. You don't always have to do that, but I find that it helps. Just to make things a little bit smoother. 1 or 2 drops is all you need. Just a couple of drops, 1 or 2. This is Super Lube. You can buy these at your hardware stores. It's a special kind of oil, and I use this mainly for tuners, just to keep things lubricated and working well. So when you put in your washer, the washer has a little bevel on one side and is flat on the other. Make sure the flat side goes facing the front of your headstock, and the bevel is basically facing outwards, right? And at this point I'm not over tightening them. I want them to be loose enough so I can move them, just to keep things adjustable while I'm working on this. That's the key when you're doing this. You have to still be able to align things properly. I'm already starting to dig these black tuners. I think the stealth look is going to be awesome on this guitar. I don't usually go for, you know, fancy upgrades. In this case, I really like this guitar, so I felt it was worth it. I'm not big into locking tuners, and I didn't feel like it was necessary on this guitar. The Wilkinson tuners, even the more budget or, you know, frugal friendly tuners like these are, work pretty well. There's still a considerable upgrade over stock tuners, I find. You can tell the good quality tuners over the cheaper ones just in the way they're made, just the way they fit together. Everything really is smooth. Everything really is easy to, you know, thread in. The ones that are less expensive are usually a little bit rough around the edges, you know what I mean? They're not as well milled. The parts, the metals, you know, overall, it really makes a difference over time, over the lifespan of your guitar, really. That's where you're going to see the main difference when you're using the guitar every single day. You won't get slipping while you're tuning, and overall it just will work better longer. So that's where you have to decide whether or not the investment is right for you. For me, this is more of a look thing. You know, I just want it to look sharp. And already I like the look of the black on black. Makes it look so much more sexy in my opinion. Alright, so let's flip this over. Let's put in the screws, tighten things up, and then we can start looking at the bridge. If you're handy with a screwdriver, that's all you really need. I would say skill level on this is 2, maybe 3, I don't know. Unless you have anything challenging with your particular guitar. If you have to make the holes larger, drill new holes, it could be a little bit more of a challenge. But typically, at this stage in the game, there's no big surprises. As I mentioned, this is an older Kramer Baretta Special. I don't know if the new ones are being made the same way, but here you can see there's definitely a glue joint, 2 pieces here. So you can see they put the Kramer 40-year logo here, and then there's the line. But I find that the guitar overall is nicely made. Alright, so we're just going to align these a little bit just by eye, just to make sure they're not crooked. Just want to loosen some of these up so I can still move them around. At this point, they're pretty straight. Okay, good. Pretty straight, and we can just give them another little tighten. Finger tight, don't over tighten them. Don't try to strip them. Sometimes less is more. Okay, so that's great. We can flip them over, and at this point we just give them a little tighten all the way around. You don't want to tighten them really hard, because that's when you can crack the paint and make divots in the paint. You just want them to be steady and not jiggly or anything like that. You know, make sure everything turns properly. Give everything a few turns, and I think we're in business. It might not be pretty at this point, fingerprints and everything, but we'll give that a clean before we do anything else. You know, before we put the strings back on, just make sure everything is aligned, everything turns. These are a lot more, let's just say, rigid when you turn them. The older ones were turning a little bit more easily. So I guess this is because they're new, they have to be broken in. But so far so good. So step 1 done. Okay, the next part of the operation is focusing on this guy. As you can see, this is all loose, so we can pretty much take this away, but we're going to flip the guitar over because we're going to have to access the back cavity here, the trem cavity. So let's take the screws off of the trem. So there we go. Take the plate off. There you see the Vegatrem is basically loose, so all I really need to do is pull off these springs. Easy peasy. Make sure that the ground wire is working and still there. We can just lift the guitar. The old Vegatrem falls out. Strings are still in there. We might actually even reuse these strings for testing purposes before we put a new set. Sometimes I like to do that. And now that we have that off, all we need to do is remove these screws. And for that you need a slightly wider screwdriver bit so that you don't strip these. I have to say the Vegatrem is expensive. You guys all know that probably by now. Very expensive, but also very good. Extremely high quality parts, very good quality metals. Even the screws are very good quality. They're not cheap. They don't strip out as easily. Stainless steel, nice and long. So yeah, you're paying a lot of money, but you're getting a system that will actually work extremely well over time. I highly recommend the Vegatrem product. They're not paying me for this or anything, so this is my own opinion, but after working with the Vegatrem on this guitar, it really makes a huge difference. Alright, so now we're taking off the pieces that we don't need. We're going to replace this with the brand new pieces. Take the new Vegatrem bridge out. We need this. This is basically the piece we have to install first, and that basically goes into the same screw holes. So there's no new screw holes to drill. So everything's kind of labeled here. You have low tension springs, high tension springs, medium tension strings, and then in the bag here you have the screws. So we have 4 screws, and that's basically what we're going to be using to go right back in here. And because they're exactly the same thread, same size and all, we don't really have to worry about using wax in the screw hole, because they're all going to basically fit right back in exactly like the old ones were. So what I like to do here is I like to screw them in, not extremely tight at all, because you want to be able to move the bar around. So I'll do the 2 outer ones first. See, at this point you can still move this side to side. We try and aim for the middle as much as possible. And really, once we screw in all of them to the same depth, then I like to fine tune. Okay? Just gives you a little bit more leverage when you're actually doing this, so that you don't have to tighten it all up and then loosen it all down again if they're not in exactly the right spot. So at this point I aim for the middle, and the good thing about this system actually is that it self-adjusts to the different sizes of holes you already have drilled in there. Because the slots are wide, you can actually match them up to the existing holes. That is how the system is thought out. So it's pretty well thought out. So this point, it's perfectly stable, and we're going to take the bridge. The bridge basically has two blades here, left and right. I don't know if you can see them. They stick out slightly. These actually will go into 2 little slots that are cut into this metal piece here, and that is where the actual bridge will sit. And you do have a little bit of play here, and that is built in by design so that you can actually move things around a little bit if you need to. Alright, so all we need to do right now is put the springs back on, and we can use exactly the same ones we had previously because they're all pretty much the same. This is the tricky part, is to get the springs in without making the Vegatrem fall out. So bear with me, guys. We're going to try and do this with one hand. Okay, so in this case here, I basically put them in the center just to kind of even out the tension on the spring and the claw as much as I can. We're just going to adjust accordingly. If I need shorter springs, I can change them out. But let's just see how everything fits on this side. Now at the beginning, when you do the setup, everything is pretty loose because at this point, you know, the strings are not holding it in place. So you really have to put the string tension on to be able to set them up properly. So let's put on the new strings and set them up. Most of the time I use Ernie Ball Super Slinky, not endorsed by them at all, but these are the ones that I normally use. If they want to endorse my videos, I would appreciate that. Don't know if they would be so kind, but just throwing it out there, you never know. Okay, so these strings actually get threaded in from the bottom of the bridge, so you have to kind of flip things over again. There's a little hole at the bottom, and these are where it would actually be threaded in. So when you push the strings through, they actually go in from the bottom of the bridge and sit there, right? So a little bit tricky. Before actually putting the strings back on, is I'm actually going to hydrate and clean the neck, because and maybe just polish the frets slightly because they need it, and it's really hard to do that once the strings are on. So give me a minute, I'm going to do that first. So I like to use my feed and wax. This is what I usually use to hydrate the fretboard. It's basically a wax and a polish. It's a conditioner and a polish all in one, and it really works well. So I just put in a little bit and rub it in. Sorry for the shaky cam, guys. So all you really have to do is put it on the fretboard, rub it in, leave it for about, I'd say 10 minutes, and then we'll wipe it off. To get the strings back on, I usually use my old technique where I basically go beyond the tuner peg, usually about 2 tuners worth, make a little kink in the string, and then start wrapping it around the post. So by doing it this way, you're basically sandwiching the string between 2 wraps, which make it a little bit more sturdy and will avoid having the string slip. I'm not over tightening anything at this point because we're going to make sure that we have enough tension on the bridge. So at this point I like to do the 2 outermost strings first. We'll do the same thing with the high E string. In this case I like to go a little bit more with the wraps because it's thinner. It's a thinner string, so we can definitely put more wraps around. So, but it's the same idea. Just put a little kink in it and start wrapping. Alright, so when the strings are in on the 2 E strings here down the neck, we can see that we want to have the bridge and the strings kind of line up over the pole pieces, because this pickup is slanted, it's never going to be 100% accurate, but we try and get them centered with the bottom pole piece here and the top pole piece there as close as we can. You can always slide this over a little bit just to make sure those line up. But what's even more critical is that the spacing of the strings are even on both sides of the neck here. So you want to make sure that it's not lopsided. Technically, you can have a little bit more space on the low side and a little less space on the high side. In this case, I think it's pretty good the way it is, but you do have some play. You see, you can slide them over if need be. So if you slide it over a little bit to the right, you have a little bit more centering on the high E string, but then the low E string is off. So you have to kind of get it close on both sides, but you're never going to get it 100% on these guitars. It's just the way they're made. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put in the rest of the strings, and then we're going to balance off the Vegatrem. Okay, at this stage of the game, all the strings are tuned up to pitch. I loosened up the screws in the back so that the strings are a little bit looser, and now the bridge seems to be pretty much level with the top of the guitar. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's kind of hard, but take my word for it, it's pretty much level. So now what I'm going to do, because the strings are new, I'm going to stretch them out. I'm going to put the bar in, wiggle it a few times, retune a couple of times just to stabilize everything and just to make sure that there's no other adjustments to be made. And then we're going to like polish off the guitar, get rid of all these fingerprints, make it nice and shiny, and it'll be ready to play. So I like to pull up on it a few times. Do that a few times just to make sure that everything's moving properly, that there's no snags, and also to stretch the strings, because ultimately the strings have to be completely stretched out properly before you can get this thing to stay in tune the way it's meant to be. You can see how smooth it is. So at this stage of the game, all that really remains to be done is to make sure that the saddles are intonated properly. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video because it kind of goes beyond the scope. I do have another video where I showed that, so if ever you're interested, you can check that video out. But that's basically all you really need to do to install a Vegatrem and tuners. So I think the guitar looks a lot better now that everything is in black. Everything matches the guitar very nicely. There's no chrome to kind of stand out. I think it looks rock and roll. What do you guys think? So there you have it. I hope you got something out of that step-by-step video and now better understand how to swap out the tuners and how easy it is to swap out the Vegatrem if you're considering upgrading. Now, I've said it many times before. I've read many comments where you guys say, but Tony, you know, the Vegatrem costs more than the guitar. Indeed it does. It is a great tremolo, and you know, you might not necessarily want to put it on an inexpensive guitar like this one, but honestly, the foundation of this guitar is very solid, and upgrading the pickup changing the bridge to something like a Vegatrem really brings it up quite a few notches and really makes the guitar a whole lot of fun to play, way more than in its original form. So if you have the budget for it and you like this kind of guitar, go for it, man, because I think you're going to love it. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to call this guitar a Kramer Baretta Special now. I might have to call it an extra special or a custom shop because it has been modified, but I think it's been made quite a bit better. Overall, guys, a great guitar to mod. You heard some sound samples there. It just plays really well. The strings are not even broken in. I mean, they're brand new strings. They're still stretching. So the tuning stability is not yet stabilized yet, but it's going to be great once the strings stretch out. And I highly recommend you guys pick up these guitars. If you find them used, you can't go wrong. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this session of Addicted to Gear. I hope you got something out of the video. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. If you haven't already subscribed, you know what to do. Hit the little bell icon. Subscribe to the channel because we can use your support. And of course, there'll be more videos, so you don't want to miss out on those. That's it for now, guys. See you soon.